Hello guys, so today I'm going to go ahead and talk about just angles in general, specifically, straight angles, right angles, and eventually angles formed by intersecting lines. So first, these are just more of a, I guess, vocabulary. A straight angle pretty much just looks like a line, and you just got to know that anytime there's a straight angle, that angle measures 180 degrees. Like, that's going to be a given. 180. Straight line, 180. Anytime you have a right angle, think of the little box or a square, right? The little corner, the angle is 90 degrees. So again, that's another one that's pretty much given. Okay. So what I'm going to do is now I'm going to go ahead and talk about how supplementary angles are created, a little bit of complementary, and then vertical. Right. So angles formed by intersecting lines. I want to remind you that anytime we have a straight line, we have a 180. So I know that the angle here is 180. I have this black line cutting it though. And let's just say that I had gotten my protractor, I put it down, and I found out that this angle right here was 30 degrees. Well, remember how this is a nice straight line, and a straight line is 180. If this straight line is 180 and this part is 30, then this piece right here has to be its missing piece. So let's say this was x, right? 180 minus 30, that's 150. So I automatically know that this angle right here has to be 150 degrees. Anytime you have two angles that add up to 180, that is called supplementary. This is what we call supplementary angles. Supplementary angles, two angles that add up to 180. A little neat thing that my wife had told me is, you see this S? If you just do a little slash to it, it becomes an 8. Okay, that's one way to remember that supplementary is the 180. There's one more thing I would like to talk about here. Remember how every single straight line is a 180? Well, let's not forget about this line right here. This is also a nice straight line. Let's call this part Y. If I was to ignore this other part, in this nice straight line, it got cut into two pieces, Y and 30. But again, it's a straight line, it's 180. And so these two should add up to 180. And again, 180 minus 30, in this case, also gives me 150. So this is 150 degrees. These two are supplementary, obviously, because they add up to 180. But the other part that's super interesting is, notice these two angles right here. They're across from each other, right? They form a nice little X, and they're across from each other. And they are the same. These are called vertical angles. Vertical angles are congruent. Congruent means the same. If you end up finding two angles that are the same measure, they are congruent, first of all. But in this case, anytime you have two angles that look like that, for example, let's say I had, and you'll usually see this anytime you see some type of X, this angle right here with this angle right here, kind of like an hourglass, they are vertical. These are called vertical angles. And the important part is that they're the same. If I told you this is 100 degrees, this one on the other side would have to be 100 degrees. Vertical angles are congruent. Very important vocabulary word right there. Alright, so now I just need to talk about complementary angles. So complementary angles, as you can see here on the side, so complementary angles are when two angles add up to 90 degrees. So usually, you'll start off with a right angle of some kind, and it'll get sliced somehow. So let's say this was 30 degrees, and this up here would have to be 60 degrees. So that 60 plus 30 is 90. Again, that's what we call complementary. Complementary angles are two angles that add up to 90 degrees. And again, my wife told me that when you get this C, you get little tricks that will help you remember. The C in complementary, you could make it into a 9, which ultimately will remind you of the 90. Okay, again, the original C got converted into a 9, and then the 90. Now that we have a general idea of what these basic angles are, we could go into this next part. Parallel lines and transversals. I'm just going to do a quick intro, and then I'll do another video where we basically go in more detail. So let's pretend for now that this angle right here, this line right here was not there. Let's just pretend. Let's say that the angle right here was 100 degrees. Okay, if that's 100, we already know that the one across should also be 100. Straight line means 180, so if that's 100, this has to be 80. And whether you think of it as vertical angles or the same, right? Straight line is 180, this one will have to be 80. So the neat thing about parallel lines and transversals is if this line is parallel to this line, then these angles should repeat. If that's 100, that's 100. And because that's 100, we would expect this to be 80, this to be 100, and this to be 80 again. For the most part, this is a pretty simple topic. The only part that you have to keep in mind is eventually when you see this, they're going to throw it in with some vocabulary words. And that will be for the next video. But again, just keep this in mind. Look how easy it is. Parallel lines, the angles just repeat.